I'm in the midst of corporate retirement, and up until now, my plan mostly involved daydreaming about what Wednesdays would look like without work. But now that it's getting real, I realized I need to stop dreaming and start planning. I've heard enough retirement stories to know the transition is more complicated than most expect. And that's when I stumbled upon Fritz Gilbert, who writes the popular retirement blog, Retirement Manifesto. His economy workshop, 20 Steps to Take in Your Final 3 Years of Work, made me realize I could be more proactive, and I wanted to shine some light on some of his ideas. I picked 6 of Fritz's most interesting steps to help you be more intentional during your final stretch of work, so you can figure out what you really want retirement to feel like, stay patient and engaged along the way, and create small rituals to make your first year of retirement meaningful and fulfilling. If you're ready to step into retirement with confidence, this conversation's for you. Let's get into it. Fritz, it feels fitting to start this conversation off with your first step from your presentation, which you labeled Take a Hike. This can be taken literally, but it's really about carving intentional time to think. What are some of the questions people should be asking themselves to figure out what they actually want retirement to look and feel like?
Yeah, take a hike, it is a metaphor, although in my case, I do like to take a hike. And the point of this, Justin, is, we're all busy, you're in your routines, you're running to work, you got meetings, you're running home, you got to, get the kids ready for bed, whatever, right? We're all busy. The transition to retirement is huge. And everybody focuses on the money, as rightly so. You got to get the money right. But there's so much more to it than that. And what I found in my research and in my personal experience is the best way to kind of develop a system to think through this stuff is to carve out a place that's a little bit out of the routine. So I used to take a hike, right? Go out in the woods, take a walk. My wife used to go to pottery class. She loved pottery class. Now she volunteers at a farm, right? Find a place that's kind of your sanctuary. It's away from the routine. It's away from the noise. And make that a part of your routine and dedicate that time to just kind of being open-minded and thinking about what you want your life to become in retirement. It's more about setting an environment to do that more so. Some of the other steps in here obviously get into the things to think about. The foundational piece of it is give yourself permission to carve out an hour a week sometime and make it different. Make it where this is going to be, it's almost meditative. It's such a long process. And for me, it was really my blog. I started writing my blog 3 years before I wrote. And when I gave the speech, I said, that was kind of my hike, because every week I was carving out time. I was sitting at the keyboard. I was thinking through these topics for myself and for my audience. And that process of intentionally thinking about it every single week, the big thing in retirement is you want to avoid phase 2. Everybody hears about the honeymoon, but phase 2 is when you get into this depression and disorientation. 85% of retirees go through it. And the whole point of the speech was, what steps can you take to avoid getting into the dreaded phase 2? And of all those steps, finding a way to carve out some time on a regular basis in your final 3 to 4 years of work is the best single piece of advice I can give people.
Yeah, I resonate with that. Your blogging experience. I feel like I had a very similar experience with this podcast, and every week getting to think about what I want retirement to look like, sometimes through other people's stories like your own, sometimes when I'm creating solo episodes. List off 1 or 2 questions or threads that you remember kind of thinking through during one of your hikes.
Everybody talks about, hey, you're home all the time now. If you've got a spouse, my wife was a stay-at-home. She took care of her mom, so she was a caregiver. Before that, our daughter, obviously. So, you're going to move from this transition of being away at work. Maybe you work from home, but you've still got your isolated time in your office. Now suddenly you're together all the time. How's that going to go? What steps should you think about, and what conversations should you have with your spouse or partner to prepare for that? That's an example of the type of things you can think about. I'll address that one real quick. What I came up with was, and I included in my book, this concept of you've got to have time for yourself. You've got to give your spouse time for themselves, but you're also going to be together a lot more than you have been in the past. So we kind of discussed he time, she time, and we time. And the concept is, hey, I want to, be able to go out and hike once a week, with my dog, and she wants to go play pickleball or have lunch with her friends. Have those discussions beforehand so that when you get there, it's not like awkward, like, well, I'm envious because you're going out and doing stuff and I'm sitting home by myself. No, have that discussion beforehand and kind of think about what you want to do with your free time that's going to be for you. It's important to have me time. That's an example. Another quick example is you're going to lose your sense of identity, right? You're known for who you are at work. You go to a party or whatever, what's the first thing people ask? What do you do for a living, right? That's gone. So what do you want to become, And that's a hard one to answer. That's a much more iterative, creative, follow your curiosity, experiment, try a lot of different things. But during this hiking time, you can just think about, hey, what do I want to do? You know, if I had no constraints on my time, if I had no boss telling me what to do, what's something that I think would be kind of interesting to explore? Listen to that inner voice, pursue your curiosity, and take the first step. And those types of experiments are tremendously helpful, and you don't have to wait until you reach fire to do that. You can do it a couple of years before you leave. My blog, your podcast, you can start things that may develop legs and be something that becomes your identity and your purpose in retirement, and there's no reason to wait. You can do those as you go. So think about those kind of things. There's infinite list of things to think about, and your brain will just kind of take you there. Just, be open to it. The other thing I would say, it's an easy little way to mentally engage with this. You always think about losing your paycheck when you leave the job, right? That's what everybody's focused on. There's a lot more that you lose besides your paycheck. I talked about sense of identity. That's one of them. You lose your relationships at work, right? So start building relationships with people that'll be there after you retire. You lose your sense of achievement when you achieve something and you get the little pat on the head. You lose the structure to your day, right? So think through all of those non-financial benefits that you're currently getting from work. Maybe focus on one each hike and say, okay, structure. My day right now, man, I hate it. I'm up at 5:30. I got to be on the road by 6:15 to beat the traffic. And, your day is very structured. It's going to be zero structure. And that's really disorienting. So think about, what do I want to plug into my calendar? In my case, I went to the gym 3 days a week, and I started taking, CrossFit and different types of classes to experiment with different stuff. That was adding structure. It was also focusing on fitness, right? So it was a twofer. And so think about all those different areas of your job that you're going to lose, and just start thinking about, I wonder if there's something I can do to try to put some of that into my post-fi life, and make those some of the thought exercises that you go through while you're hiking as well.
Yeah, there were a couple of things that I wanted to pull out there. A, like the activity or the investment you can do before you even retire. And I think that can give you a sense of purpose kind of post-retirement, but also it might give you the push to get out the door too. Like podcasting and then creating a business around podcasting kind of gave me the push to actually quit corporate once and for all. I think if I didn't have this here, I'm not sure if I would have taken that step forward. So having something to really be excited about and retire into actually could be multi-beneficial for you.
Absolutely. And I really encourage people, don't wait until you retire and say, I'll figure all this out when I retire. That's 100% guaranteed you're going to phase two. It's going to happen. It guaranteed. 85% of people go to phase two, and probably 100% of the people that don't think about this stuff before they retire go there. So the trick is, think about this stuff, experiment with some of it, and if you're lucky, like my blog and like your podcast, you'll hit on something. My wife's charity. I mean, there's things that just kind of naturally develop, and you start exploring them. And if it's kind of like, if it's meant to be, they kind of start gaining momentum. It's fun. It's a really fun process. And there is no reason. As a matter of fact, I would strongly encourage people, don't wait until you retire to start playing around with that.
Let's move on to step 2, which is actually step 4 in your presentation, prepare for the slog. When you've started daydreaming about the end, I feel like those final years, especially that final year, can start to feel really long.
Yeah.
What can someone do to stay patient and engaged in that stretch before retirement?
Yeah, patience is the hardest part. That's how I started this section, and it really is. You're almost there, but you're not quite there. You're like, I hope they don't cut that benefit at work that I need to get there, whatever, right? I hope that bonus is good because I need that bonus. There was a lady that I didn't particularly care for, and she retired like 3 years before me. And I was like, oh, I can't believe she got out before me, And so my slog started like 3 years out. So I wrote an article about it, said the things we never talk about. And I wrote this like just maybe a couple months ago. So I was like 7 years retired, and I finally had the courage. And the whole point of the article is, here's what I was really thinking during those last 3 years, right? You're pretending, right? You're in the meetings, you're engaged, you're trying to contribute, you're doing your job. You're not really there, right? Your gut's not in it, like you don't have that drive, but you got to fake it, right? And you kind of get this imposter syndrome thing, and nobody talks about it. So I was like, doggone it, this is part of the retirement transition, and it's something that people should think about and talk about and prepare for. And my whole point of this topic, number one, it's real. The patience is hard, but recognize once you get there, it feels a lot shorter than it does when you're in the middle of it. I get it. I've been there. I totally get this one. And that 3 years it felt like an eternity. But looking back at it now, it was very short. So what I encourage people to do, gamify it a little bit. Put a countdown thing on your phone. That's kind of fun. My wife and I, we had a whiteboard, and we drew a river going through the mountains with every month until I retired. And at the end was our cabin, because we retired to a cabin in the mountains. And we checked off each month. You can do things like that to kind of make it fun. But more importantly, I think, rather than just sit there and get frustrated and run your numbers the 72nd time, oh, maybe I should try this scenario or that scenario, to stop that, right? Once your numbers are kind of where you're just waiting for the numbers, you're not going to get a lot of benefit by running 72 more iterations through a calculator. Take that time and make it beneficial by, rather than just looking at the numbers, and rather than just waiting and waiting and waiting, say, you know what, I'm going to put this time to use that's going to serve me well after I retire. And that's really where the take a hike comes in. That's where thinking about these things you're going to lose besides the money come in. When you're at work, work, absolutely. But when you're not at work, start carving out more and more of your mental time to think about what you want your life to be, because it's entirely within your control to shape the life you want it to be, other than maybe a health issue or things like that. But you've got tremendous control, but with that comes an obligation, right? You've got to figure it out. So use this last couple of years when you're just really frustrated and tired, and start daydreaming about what you want your life to be, and try to put it to good use, because you've got to slog through it anyway. You might as well make it as productive as you can.
It's so hard. I'm in the midst of it right now. I'm 1 month away from my official corporate retirement.
Hey, good for you. That's exciting. Yeah.
I started this journey about 18 months ago, and I actually have been moving from full-time to part-time. I'm down to 2 days a week right now. So it's felt lighter, and it's been nice to have this gentle slide into corporate retirement. I just noticed last week, something that I probably would have been way more proactive about, way more excited about, way more invested in problem solving. It popped up at work again, and I'm like, you know what? I don't care as much. It's a hard dichotomy, because I'm a high achiever. Yep. I take a lot of pride in my work, and this employer has been very good to me for a long time. So I want to do them justice, and I want to finish strong. But at the same time, I'm not trying to get worked up about things, because honestly, in a month from now, it's not going to matter whatsoever. Exactly. So it's an interesting balance, I find. It has been nice to slowly step out of that. And at 4 p.m., I can walk away from work and I'm not thinking about it anymore. Yeah. It is what it is.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I found through this period, by this point in your career, you're pretty good at what you do, right? You wouldn't be where you are if you weren't. And most of us are high achievers that are on the path to FI. So we're, that tends to be the personality type. So what I found is you tend to be more productive anyway. So you can get your work done in less amount of time. And I never, gave any indication at all in any meeting or discussion that I wasn't 100% engaged. And really, you kind of fake it, I guess, in a way. Your heart's not in it, but you're still contributing. And because you're so much more productive, because you're kind of an expert at this point, you can still contribute even if your heart's not entirely in it. And you got to work through it. A month ago, I remember doing 5-year strategic plans. I was in a function that I had to do some long-term executive planning type stuff. And I was like, this is such a waste of time. I'm not going to be here for any of this, right? But you still do it. You still make the presentations, you do what you got to do. That's all. But a month, it's going to be over like that, Justin. You're going to be on the other side of the starting line before you even know it. So.
Yeah, actually, I only have 8 working days left. So I almost feel like I'm in my 2-week window right now, which is crazy.
Good for you.
Let's keep moving along. Let's actually talk about a money step. And there honestly wasn't a lot of financial steps in your 20 steps, but I do want to pull forward step number 5, which is step 3 in this conversation, prepare for withdrawals. So for decades, the goal is to save and grow your money. And then all of a sudden the plan flips and you're supposed to start spending all of this money that you saved. How do you make that transition without it feeling uncomfortable and maybe even getting it wrong?
Yeah, this is a big one. And this, I intentionally, I think I had 5 financial out of the 20 and the 15 were non-financial. It intentionally, because it shows that most of us get the financial stuff right. But within the one financial area that some people don't recognize, the skills that you've developed over the last 20, 30 years of accumulation, dollar cost averaging, pay yourself first, diversify, rebalance, blah, blah, blah. We know how to do that. But what people sometimes fail to recognize is the skills that you've developed for the accumulation aren't the skills that you need for the decumulation. So you've got a huge psychological shift when you move from saving to spending out of your investments to begin with, but you've also got an entirely new toolkit. And the main reason for that, I like to talk about the risks. And I think when you're accumulating, the risk is you lose your job. Okay, I'll have a 6-month safety cash, whatever, it's fine. Bear market, best thing that can happen to you because you're buying them cheap. When you retire, your risks are entirely different. They're well known. That I'm not making any of this stuff up. It's been around, but sequence of return risk. What if the bear market hits in your last 6 months of work or 6 months into your retirement and the market goes down 20 or 30%? What are you going to do about that? That's number one. You're spending without income, right? So your portfolio has to last the rest of your life? Have you got it properly allocated to make sure you've got some stuff that's going to keep up with inflation? At the same time, have you got enough liquidity to avoid selling after a bear market? Inflation's a big one, right? And inflation's quiet. You don't necessarily see it, and it compounds over time. So when you're working, your paycheck goes up. It's not a risk, really. Once you're retired, your paycheck isn't going up, right? You're depending on your income. So have you got an appropriate allocation to asset classes that have historically demonstrated the ability to keep up with inflation? You might have to change some asset allocation, right? I would almost guarantee you're going to have to change asset allocation from your accumulation to decumulation. And then the last one is longevity risk. Number one concern people have is outliving their money. So how are you structuring your portfolio? Do annuities make sense for you? Four-letter word. It shouldn't be. People should look at it. If you have zero pension, and an annuity is not a bad word to at least, do a Chat GPT and see what it's about and see if it makes sense. So the whole point is the things that you need to think about are really different. And the one that to me kind of bubbles up most prominently, and it's the step after this one, but it follows immediately with it, is how are you going to set up your paycheck system? Because you've got to replace that paycheck. You've been just dollar cost averaging in every month. That's fine. Well, what are you going to do to kind of do the reverse of that and have money coming out every month? How are you going to structure that? So that's really what this step is all about, is figuring out what skills do you need to develop to manage your portfolio? And then psychologically, are you ready to move from scrimping and saving to, now your safe withdrawal rate, I'm going to use, pick a number, 4%. Guess what? You can and should spend that 4%. You don't get bonus points for saving. You're not saving anymore. You've got to spend what your formulas tell you you're safe to spend. And learning to spend without fear is a big part of the transition as well.
It's probably the biggest thing that is on my mind right now, and probably the hardest piece. I feel pretty confident I'll learn the money skills that's needed, and I'll figure out how to decumulate effectively, at least once again, from a monetary standpoint. The psychological shift and drawing down on something has been a challenge. Was there anything that you did with your paycheck kind of leading up to retirement? Like, for example, for me, at the start of the year, I actually just started maxing out my 401k. I was only going to have about 3 or 4 months of maxing out my 401k. So it was already a big dollar, and I'm part-time. So almost my entire paycheck is just going to my 401k right now. At the time, I was like, I don't want to set up a 401k kind of post-work or a solo 401k for my business, at least not until 2026. So I'm just going to max it out with my dollars now because I don't need the cash flow. But it's actually been a really nice benefit of it has been I've gotten 3 months of practicing how I'm going to pay for life without that biweekly paycheck hitting too.
And that's one of the steps I do is kind of set up a practice run where you kind of live on your retirement income. So you've done it. I think the biggest thing I had, Justin, was the opposite. We talked about the emergency fund. You got 6 months because you might lose your job. Mm-hmm. Well, you need a bigger safety fund than that to offset the risk of a bear market, right? So I wanted to build that up to 3 years of cash. I use the bucket system. So if you have 30 years worth of savings, that'd be a 3.3% safe withdrawal rate if you do the math. And you want 3 years, and that's 10% cash. It sounds like a lot, but it's not ridiculous. And then you have some bonds. You can get to a 60-40 pretty easily with 10% in cash, and I don't think that's overly conservative. But how long is it going to take you to build up 3 years of cash, right? Because all my money was in 401ks, and I'm like, I can't get that money until I'm 59 and a half. I mean, you could do the 55, rule of 55, but keep it simple. I didn't have enough money in taxable liquid assets to be able to fund that bridge. So I'd done the spreadsheet work. I'm like, okay, I got to build up my bridge. I got to build up my cash. So I actually took my 401k down to just the 6% match. I've been maxing it out for years. I took it down to just the 6% match, and I shoved everything into a taxable money market fund to build up that cash, right? Every bonus went into the taxable money market fund to build up the cash. So yeah, a lot of these transitions to decumulation, you don't wait until you retire. You need to be working on those a couple of years before you retire because it takes some time to do some of these shifts. Let's say you're 90% VTSAX, right? You don't want to go into retirement. Actually, you don't want to be 6 months from retirement at 90% VTSAX. You better start getting some of that out when the market's doing well and start diversifying your portfolio to minimize your risk because your risks are going to change like we just talked about. And all of those steps are things you should be doing in the last 6 to 12 months of work rather than waiting until you retire.
I think that's a great strategy. And I guess the 401k max for me was kind of like the last bucket that I filled up.
Yeah.
Like I already hit the 12-month emergency bucket. I have some cash flow from a business too. So 12 is fine for me. And I did a few other things, filled up a couple sinking funds and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then I was just like, okay, now I don't need this cash flow, but I want to live like I don't have this paycheck either. So yeah, made that transition.
Yeah, that's good. So, but see, the point is there, you were intentional, you thought about it, which is exactly what this step is, right? Think about it, start transitioning to it, whatever works for you. And that's exactly what you did. So you nailed it.
Yeah, and I've taken plenty of hikes too. So
Yeah.
I figured there's lots of things that's on my mind. Fritz, let's keep moving on to step number 4 in this episode, make personal. And this one might have seemed boring to you on the outside, but I love how practical this step was, especially as someone that's 1 month out from corporate retirement.
Exactly.
A lot of our digital life, our accounts, our files, even our contacts can be tied up to our work email and our devices. What are some key things that people should clean up or separate before they leave their job?
Yeah, and this one I actually wrote an article, it's one of my most read articles. It was the 20 things to do in your final year of work. So I kind of broadened it out for one step in this whole thing. But this whole 20 steps to take, people can look it up. It's on my blog, 20 steps to take in the year before retirement. But that was really what I did as I went through this. I had a checklist, right? Keep a checklist because there's a lot of stuff that's going on. You got to keep track of it. So I had this little spreadsheet, and I would kind of say, okay, I got to make sure I got to move my personal contacts off my work computer and figure out what I'm going to do. I had stuff saved on a spreadsheet, passwords. This is, eons ago. I was a dinosaur, right? So I better get that to a password manager and get that set up. Oh, I'm getting all these emails at work from all these blogs and stuff that I read because, hey, we all cheat and read blogs at work. Let's admit it, right? Hey, I better unsubscribe with my work email and get that moved over to my personal email, right? So as I was going through this list, I just kept it all down, wrote it all down. Okay, check. And then I did kind of a post-mortem after I retired, and I thought, that's actually a pretty good list. I should turn that into a blog post. So I put these 20 things in there, and that's really what this make your personal is. It's disconnecting that extension cord that you've got into your work systems. If you build in some time to just be aware of it, it's surprising how many things are connected to that, right? You're on your work computer all the time. So there's a lot of stuff on your work computer that's probably not work. And you've got to get that floppy drive. Wow. Get that, get that drive and get it over to your other one, put it up on the cloud, do what you got to do, but get your personal stuff off the work thing and don't wait till the end because you're not going to have time. It takes some time to do this. I was fortunate. We had a, work email system, whatever. So I had, thousands of contacts in this thing. And I talked to one of the IT guys and said, hey, is there any way you can just throw that into a file that I can blow into my Gmail or whatever? He goes, yeah, no problem. So, he did it for me. So that's another step. And sometimes you have to reach out to other people to help you with some of this stuff. The more time you can give to kind of think through that and just be observant as you're living your daily life. Oh, yeah, that's something I probably ought to change, right? That's pretty important to do because if you put it off, and you're leaving the office and you suddenly realize, oh, geez, I never got those contacts off of there. They're gone. You go Monday and you can't get to your work email anymore. You're done. So take some time to think about that. And I don't know if there are any specific ones. A lot of your social media, you'll have your work email address in there. I did anyway. So go through all your social media accounts, make sure they're pointing to you. If you got emails on some of your other accounts that have your work email address, make sure you change them over to your personal email. I think this is probably less of an issue now because people do tend to change jobs more frequently than back in my day, but it's still something everybody needs to think through and work through to make sure you don't get anything stranded out there.
Yeah, I'm actively working through it. I made a couple of notes on some things that I did this week. All my important logins, I made sure they moved over to my personal.
Yep.
I went through all my drives and saved any of my personal files and moved them over to personal or my work. I downloaded some contacts that I wanted to have kind of post-retirement, two-factor authentication. If I had my email, my work email tied to two-factor, I changed that. And I just saved some copies of performance reviews, agreements, some records, some personal things for me. If I ever re-enter the workforce, there might be some things that I want to keep and save for that process. But also just wanted to make myself, double back up some things that I know was going to be gone come, May 8th when I'm gone.
Yeah. You're crushing this, Justin. You're on every single one of these. That's exactly the right step. You're doing it right. That's how you do it.
Well, once again, it's helpful when I had to prep for a conversation like this, and then you made me think about all this stuff. I'm like, oh man, here we go.
You saw all 20 of these steps. You only shared 6 of them, but you saw all 20. So yeah, you're ready.
Let's move to step 5. One of my favorites, fill your activity jar. And I know you've had a lot of conversations about this, and it's so ironic that you've only used your activity jar like 2 times. But this is one of my favorite. Tell me a little bit about the problem that you were trying to solve with it and kind of what the activity jar actually is too.
Yeah. This kind of goes back to that slogging phase that we were talking about. You're in that slog and, we're trying to find a way to gamify it and make it fun. And we were about a year out from retirement, and I just had this idea, and I talked to my wife about it. She goes, yeah, it sounds fun. So we set up literally, I got a picture of it in the presentation, like a Tupperware jar. And we had a little lid on it with a mail slot that we cut, and we had little Post-it notes or index cards. And each week, my wife and I would write one thing that we wanted to do post-retirement. We didn't tell the other person, right? So every week we tried to do this. It would be kind of fun because you'd have to go out and Google and say, oh, things to do in this area, or maybe there's a nearby town and you haven't really, let's go see what's that. So you'd Google that town. I want to take a day trip over to this town, right? So it kind of gave you something to do for that year that you're slogging anyway. And it kind of made you broaden your horizons to think about activities that you might want to do when you retire. But to me, the more important thing is it's something you do collaboratively with your spouse. She's doing the same thing. So you've got half of them in the bucket are from me, half of them are from her. Neither of us know what the other ones are. It helps you get through that waiting period with a small activity that kind of gets you thinking about some of the things you're going to be able to do when you're free. And our intention was, every week, once I retired, we'd pull one thing out of the jar, and it would be a surprise. Oh, this is hers. That's kind of fun. Or it'd be mine. Oh, good. We get to do that one. And it would give us something to do for the first year. The reality, as you said, we got so busy, and life has been great, and we've more than filled our time, and we're very happy. We haven't found the need to go to the jar, but now we're saying, we should pull. Like somebody at the conference, they were talking to me about it. They said, you should dump those on the ground, open them all up, and see how many you've actually done anyway, because I'm sure we've done a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of the activities in the jar, but we didn't go through the process of actually pulling them out. I still have the jar. It's still full of all the notes. So it's going to be fun to go through those at some point and figure out what we're going to do with it. But the important thing is finding a way to creatively think about your future. A common problem, people tend to focus kind of on, they want to make bucket list is too broad, but it gets tactical, and they want to do all this stuff and do all this stuff. That's not really the path to happiness in retirement, but it's kind of fun to do, right? Uh-huh. Your real joy in retirement is going to be, like we talked about earlier, experimenting with things, finding something that clicks. It's bigger than a day trip to some nearby city. It's finding something where you're giving back, making a contribution. I talk about the 4 C's in this presentation, but basically that's where you should really focus your mental energy, is on what do you want to become, what do you want to build, what do you want to give back to society. Those are where you're going to get your long-term joys. But the activity jar is a nice little supplemental fun thing that, it's a fun exercise to go through.
Yeah, I feel like it's a piece of the pie, and it's almost like I feel like it complements take a hike pretty well too, where it's like, what are some things that I want to try? And honestly, if you're even more intentional about it and you put things in there that might push you outside your comfort zone, like, for example, I've always wanted to do an improv class. So I'd probably put improv into the activity jar, and I could easily see improv being a slippery slope to a purpose of mine. It's like if I really enjoy it, I'd probably maybe sign up for a season of classes. And then all of a sudden I'm doing some live improv. Like, I could see that kind of moving that direction. So it could push you outside your comfort zone if you are someone that needs something like that.
Yeah, this maybe not have been in my jar, but I discovered that a buddy of mine had a wood shop, and my wife started this charity. We needed to build some dog houses. So I went to his wood shop, and, we built some stuff. I was like, man, that's really fun, A couple of years later, I ended up building a wood shop, and on the other side of that wall right there, I've got a woodworking shop. There's a thing here, it's called the Folk. It's a really cool kind of a weekend retreat place where they've got classes in all the arts and crafts you can imagine. They've got ironworking, they've got woodworking, you can make instruments, you can do, quilting. I mean, limitless amount of kind of those types of activities. Exactly what you're talking about. You take the improv class. Well, maybe somebody's going to go take up metalworking and just do it for a weekend at a class, and maybe it's something you fall in love with. That's a really good addition to try to think intentionally about those items you're putting in there. And if you can find things that are a curiosity to begin with, improv, and could potentially ramp up to something, those are really good things to be thinking about.
Austin Furniture Making is a company here, and I took a woodworking shop with them, and it's so fun. It's such a fun thing to do. I could see myself getting into woodworking.
Yeah, it's fun. I love getting sawdust in my hair. What can I say? It's fun.
All right, Fritz, let's finish up. Step number 6 here, which is actually step 20 in your presentation. Enjoy crossing the starting line. And I love that you reframed it to the starting line. This one really resonated with me. Those final months of work can be stressful, emotional, exhausting, all the different adjectives that you want to put there. How do you make yours meaningful, maybe even fun?
Yeah, this is important. And it's easy to think about, hey, in a month, I'm going to be retired in your case, right? And you should. That's an exciting thing. The thing I encourage people to also think about is, in a month, I'm probably never going to see these people again. Oh, yeah, we'll get together, we'll have lunch. Yeah, sure. Everybody says that, but nobody does, right? So the reality of it is you're probably not going to see those people. And there's people in your workplace that you've got good relationships with, that you've had years of working together, you've tackled some good projects, you're partners in some of this stuff. And really be intentional about taking the time. Your work doesn't matter as much anymore. You're out the door, your replacement's been named. Go to lunch with that buddy of yours that you haven't talked to in a while and let them know, hey, I've really enjoyed working with you. Remember that thing? Tell some war stories together, right? Take time to be intentional and spend time with the people that do matter in your workplace. When the announcement comes out about your retirement, your email's going to get flooded. Everybody's going to be shooting you congratulations. That's great. Take time. If one comes in from Bill and Bill's a good friend of yours, pick up the phone and call Bill, or, send him a personal note back and carve out time to make that last couple months a time to really reflect on, hey, this is what I've achieved. This is the last month you're going to be known as the person you are, right? After you cross that starting line, it doesn't matter what you did. And this is your time to kind of relish in the success of your career and those that made it possible. So be intentional and say thank you and enjoy the ride, because, man, I remember I got off that plane. That was the picture there, was me getting off the plane coming back from Chicago. And those were the couple of guys I'd worked with. And, I got my arms around them. And when that embrace broke, that was it. I was walking down the terminal and getting in my car and driving to the mountains, and I never went back. So that's kind of a momentous time, right? And you do need to really pause and celebrate the moment you retire, but also take time to celebrate with the people that you've worked with, that you've really enjoyed working with. Even if there are only a few of them. I know a lot of workplaces are not that great, but there's some people in there that you like. And in my case, I was really fortunate. My boss, that flight that I was coming back from Chicago, was a big conference in my industry. So the very last night that I worked, he said, hey, Fritz, he said, invite 10 of your best friends from the industry. I'm gonna take you guys out to a really nice dinner to celebrate your retirement. And it was literally like the night before I retired, and it was my best friends, and it was a really special night. And I've always appreciated him doing that for me.
Fritz, I took this one to heart whenever I was prepping and I came across this, and now I'm starting to sign off emails with just a short little story, or even just something simple. Like, it's been really great working with you. So yeah, you really put this one on my radar, and I've realized it's opened up a lot. Like right now I'm in a back and forth conversation with a colleague that told me that she's also taking like a semi-retirement, and she wants to spend some time with her kids. She's got like 3 more years left with her kids before they go to college. And it's been really fun, the stories that come up or the conversations that have transpired just by me openly acknowledging that I'm leaving and that they've meant a lot to me. And it's been really fun working on this project or working alongside them. And yeah, honestly, I think it's made it more enjoyable to be leaving and this exit here. Like, I spend just like 30 minutes to an hour every single day just signing off a little bit more than I would, or picking up the phone and making conversation. Perfect. There again, you're 3 for 3. I think on the 3 we've talked about. You're nailing it. You're doing well. You should be doing this stuff. You got to speak at Economy next year. You got it down. All right, Fritz. Well, it's been a blast having you on the show. Retirement Manifesto is your blog. You write that alongside of another writer, correct? Yeah, that was kind of a neat story. And this fits with the topic we're talking about. One thing is, when you get into retirement, don't think this is kind of, I'm going to get there and that's it. Life is what it is. Continually challenge yourself, continually experiment, continually pursue new things. I use the analogy of a poker hand. And in retirement, you've got all these cards in your hand, and you're free to pick up any new cards. You're free to discard any cards. Your goal is to get the best possible cards in your hand that you can. And over time, some of the cards in your hand are going to get a little stale, and you're like, you know what, that's getting a little stale. I'm going to put that one down and pick up a different one. And I'd been writing every single week for years, and it was kind of a self-imposed deadline. And I was like, this is kind of stupid. I'm sitting here on my computer every week, self-imposed deadline. I'd rather be out in the woods. This is starting to feel like a job. And I was like, well, heck, it's within your control. Just do it, right? So I put a post out there and I said, hey, just didn't want to do this and not tell, because most blogs kind of fade away when people retire. It's an interesting phenomenon. I haven't.
But I think the reason I haven't is because I was intentional and I recognize this is becoming a burden. I'm going to step back from it. I'm going to let my audience know. And the most amazing thing happened, Justin. I sent that article out. I was like, you know what? That's my retirement 2.0. So I'm going to go out and celebrate. So I went out on a mountain biking trip out to North Carolina. I live on the North Carolina border, we're up in the mountains. Get off the mountain bike trail, get back to my car, and bing, there's a text from Dana Ansbach, who's a rock star in the community. She's a CEO of a personal financial management firm. She's a CFP. Been following her work for years, been on her show. And she said, hey, I read your article. She goes, I had an idea. Well, what would you think if I maybe just wrote for you maybe once a month or something? And I was like, oh my gosh, what an answer to prayer, right? So we kind of talked about it back and forth and very informal. She just said, look, I used to write and I can't really write in my firm because all the compliance stuff, but I just want a place where I can kind of talk about what I'm thinking about retirement. I was like, Dana, I'd love to have you. So now, fast forward a year later, I'm doing a post a month. She's doing a post a month. We're generating new content every 2 weeks, but I only have to write once a month. It's made writing fun again. I don't feel like it's an obligation. Oh yeah, I can easily do an article in a month. I put that card down or put it partly down, but a beautiful solution came out by telling the world about it, having somebody come up and say, hey, I'd like to partner up with you, and it's worked out great. So yeah, we're partners now. So it's fun. And the fun thing is, I don't think this has been announced yet, Dana and I are going to speak together at the Boglehead Conference this year.
Sweet.
So we got invited to speak together. So it's kind of continuing to evolve. So it's fun.
So cool. Sounds like hit the river on that one.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So, my point being, never stop experimenting, never stop tweaking things. Structure is another example. The first 6 to 12 months of retirement are going to feel a little wonky. Well, experiment, put a little bit more structure in, take a little bit more structure out, right? All of these levers are things that you're in control. And I don't think that iterative process of trial and error ever stops. I don't think in my life it will, because I found that really is the true path to find things that keep you excited and make life fun and be a lifelong learner, try new things. And this is just one microcosm of it, talking about my blog, but I kind of live my whole life that way. And the beauty of post-fi life is it gives you the freedom to do that in spades, right? Again, it gives you the obligation because you've got to do it. But I'm sure 99% of the people that listen to your show are self-starters, they're successful, they wouldn't be listening if they weren't, and they're going to fall into that camp. So my encouragement to them, start practicing this stuff now, because for the last 25, 30 years, you've kind of been forced into this mold of do what the man says, and you get slotted into it through your school years, through your working years. That's all going to change in retirement. So starting in the last couple of years of retirement to exercise this creative side of your brain, it's time well spent, and it's a skill set that you're going to develop that you'll just continue to nurture and grow the rest of your life.
I think that's well said and a great place to end things. Once again, folks, this is Fritz Gilbert from Retirement Manifesto. Fritz, man, it's been a blast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate it, man. Take care.